Hello and welcome. This is Captain Aquarius coming to you on November the 11th of 2016 with this new video about the coming full moon of November 14th. As you can see in the chart here, we can easily tell that this is the moment of a full moon because you have the sun in the sign Scorpio exactly opposite to the position of the moon in the sign of Taurus, there in the fifth house of the chart. This chart is cast for the small town of Pisac, Peru, which is in the sacred valley of the Urubamba River, near the city of Cusco, the ancient capital of what was the Quechua, or better known as the Inca Empire in the old days. And instead of casting this chart for some place like Bonn, Germany, or Munich, or Berlin because of the crisis that is happening with Deutsche Bank, or Delhi, India, with what is happening now with the Indian currency, or with Shanghai, China, or Washington, D.C., or one of these other places where people are working so hard to exhaustion to try to preserve a status quo that is unsustainable, let us cast the chart this time for a place that has a very interesting and cooperative and medicinal sense of community about the way that people interact with each other and the way that they practice what is called the principle of Ayni. That is Ayni in the Quechua language, which means in one word reciprocity, but means in another sense of the word doing what nature wants us to do, with the understanding that if we do it, nature will in turn take care of us with an abundance of food, with abundant rainfall, pure water, pure air, all things that are necessary to sustain a healthy life. Why not really focus on this location and the things that it exemplifies at a time when we are so much in need of operating with more fundamental common sense and more empathy for one another and for the world in which we live? The placements of these planets in this chart, and yes, we have an abundance of barking dogs in this area as well, as you hear in the background. The sun here in the sign of Scorpio, the sign of death and regeneration, is in the 11th house of community, along with the planet Mercury in the sign of Sagittarius. The moon in the sign of Taurus is in the 5th house of our creativity, our sense of play, our sense of individual contributions that we can make to our local communities and economies, whereas the 11th house tends to emphasize wider communities and economies in which we also participate. The main things to observe about this chart, really, in terms of the conditions that we are navigating now. 3 days after an American election, in which a self-inflating balloon has been selected in some way as the next president of the United States, one of the alternatives that were most likely to somehow be engineered and scammed and greased into position by those who are determined to uphold the status quo and are hanging on with white knuckles in a state of fear to what doesn't work that they hope they can preserve a little longer. The chart itself manifests this and reflects it. We're going to look at a few specific things here that show us what the current conditions are. If we look in the 3rd house of the chart, there you see the planet Neptune next to the upside down horseshoe, which represents the south node of the moon. The moon's nodes, and you see another one exactly opposite to the south node, up there in the 9th house, the right side up horseshoe in the sign of Virgo. These nodes are points where the moon's orbit crosses the orbit of the sun, and they represent a couple of basic things as they are generally interpreted by Western astrologers. One is that they are relationships more with groups of people than with individuals. The North Node is considered the attracting, strengthening, cementing force in our relationships, while the South Node is the stressing, splitting, dissolving force in relationships. If the South Node is in this proximity to Neptune, and therefore Neptune is opposite to the North Node, this generally means that the Neptunian principles of the negative end of Neptune's value spectrum, fraud, deception, self-delusion, manipulation, propaganda, lying, concealment, a lack of communal sense or spirit, which is what is really involved here. The impulse of the time is to go against the interests of the whole and look only for one's own specific interests or for the interests of a narrow faction or party or group within the nation or community, which is clearly what is going on right now, certainly in the United States, and with those who are finding their best ways to respond to this very strange event that has just occurred. The general meaning of this kind of alignment here, and it will remain in effect, fortunately not for that long, only until the middle of December, when it really fades away, because the Moon's node is moving backward faster than Neptune is moving, and even when Neptune goes direct and is no longer retrograde, these two will no longer be in close relationship. But the point is here that when Neptune is challenged, when Neptune is afflicted, he goes to the passive and deceptive end of his value spectrum, instead of confronting things in a way that is open and honest and direct. He tends to go underwater and hide. And so it is no wonder that people are now searching for the proper way in which to respond to the events that are happening now. It is no wonder that honest people are tentative and deceptive people are doing everything that they can to deceive and cheat other people. This is a time to be cautious and to be very circumspect in the commitment of our energies and resources at a time when so many people are indeed inclined to attempt to exploit us in our current condition of confusion and vulnerability. To look at other things here, we notice that always in these charts, you see there are countervailing influences that are available to us to help us to navigate these conditions properly. One of them is the position of Jupiter up there at the top center of the chart, the planet of optimism, abundance, enthusiasm, expansion, prosperity, placed very close to the midheaven point at the top center of the chart in the sign of Libra, which is the sign of marriage and partnership, and thereby conveys everything that this sign embodies concerning our close relationships, our abilities to respond to one another in a spirit of cooperation and balance and community. We notice here, however, that Jupiter is placed in a square, an angle of relationship of about 90 degrees with the 2 points that you see over at the extreme left of the chart. The planet Pluto you can see over there right below the line of the ascendant. That is the point that is there between the 12th and the first houses. This represents the point that was on the eastern horizon, or will be at the time that this full moon chart goes into effect. It represents the way that we project our energies into the world, the way that we pursue our creative intentions, the way that we tell the planet who we are. With Pluto on this point, naturally we are concerned with what that planet embodies in the theme of death and regeneration, that something has gone here and something has come to replace it, and we can be in the position, therefore, of retreating in a kind of conservative Capricornian fashion, so that we withdraw and we wait and we see what we are going to do, or we can work in a more imaginative and communal Saturnian sense, accepting the hard work that is necessary now to begin to reconstruct from what has just collapsed. When Jupiter and Pluto are in this kind of alignment, as we see them here, it means, therefore, that this energy of Jupiter, which is organizational, which is connected with institutions of wealth and power and authority, is against this planet of very high intensity, this planet of death and regeneration, of transformation, so that what tends to happen here is that losses occur, is that there are collapses of concepts and values. There is a desire on the part of some of the people to exploit others. There is a tendency toward fanaticism. So it is no wonder that one of the images that occurs to some of us now is what we see in the old historical movies of 83 years ago, when the Nazis have just taken power and people are marching in the streets, singing in torchlight parades with thousands of swastika flags and so on. And even though, yes, there is a great deal of difference between what has just happened in the United States and what happened in Germany in January of 1933. Let us not delude ourselves by believing that there is no relationship whatsoever. The man who has just been elected has done so by appealing to fear and prejudice and rage, and we can expect, therefore, that those who are most committed to his cause will practice these emotional energies, and therefore our challenge and our opportunity is to estimate and to create the best way of responding to this kind of emotional climate in which we are placed now. And so, therefore, what is needed, and what this chart very much embodies, is that sense of what Jupiter represents at the highest point in the chart, which is the spiritual thrust of the whole chart, where the soul wants to go, where our most authentic values and goals reside. Are we going to be narrow? Are we going to be hateful? Are we going to align against other people? Or are we going to find the ways to reach out to find common cause, so that as the emotional currents, which are very hot at this time, begin to cool and begin to congeal, it will be possible for us to find ways in which we can reconnect and rebuild. That is what this chart is all about now. We are going to see a recurrence in the middle of 2017, as Jupiter moves forward and backward and then forward again, of the relationship that we have noticed between Jupiter and Pluto. We are going to see the continuing theme of a tension between those who want to tell the truth, who want to help others to find the truth, and those who want to exploit our hopes, our illusions, our images, and our passions for purposes of gaining what they can from our own confusion. Jupiter also represents the money. Jupiter is the bank. Jupiter is the institutions of power and established wealth and authority. He is also personal wealth. And so, therefore, what we are looking at here is the ways in which the money system is going to change, in some ways which are evident to us and some ways which are not. It is essential that we perceive that those who are most trying to manipulate the system for their benefit are not really interested in getting more money. They have more of it than they can possibly need. What they are interested in is creating the maximum amount of fear of not having money among as many people as possible. This could be described as a kind of financial terrorism, which, instead of inspiring terror in people through bloodshed, is inspiring it instead by the taking away of money and the taking away of our idea that we will have enough to live on. People are terrified by this, and the more this fear can be stoked, the more these reptilian and allied agencies will feast on fear in the way that they do. They consume it in the way that you and I consume food and drink. They feed on fear in the same way that we are nourished by love. Therefore, we hold the frequencies of love and courage in order to help each other get through. Choose love.